Hi guys. Before we proceed to this video, we've got something very important to share with you. Neoliberalism, Inequality and Authoritarianism by Professor Jon V. Kofas is available for purchase. You can order it directly from the publisher Little French eBooks or through Amazon.
Hello, this is a session on the 30th anniversary on the genocide in Bosnia-Herzegovina in the town of Srebrenica. This is the first European genocide after World War II, and it has some common elements with the genocide in Gaza. Scholars and journalists on the 20th anniversary and especially on the 30th anniversary have noted that the genocides in the post-World War II period have taken place, especially in the global South. And today, and this month, today is July 8th. In just 3 days, on July 11th, there is the tragedy of the 30th anniversary of the Srebrenica genocide in Bosnia-Herzegovina. Srebrenica is a town, by the way, on the border of Bosnia-Herzegovina and Serbia, which was designated by the United Nations as a safe town, and there were troops supposedly guarding the Muslim population. At the time, the troops happened to be from Holland. They were Dutch, about just under 400 troops, United Nations troop, so-called peacekeepers, but obviously that did not do anything. This is a subject that is of enormous importance for a number of reasons. I want to start because yesterday, July 7th, there was in the White House a guest of President Trump, and that was the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, who, according to the International Criminal Court, has a warrant out on his arrest. Ironically, and I just don't know how to put this, but ironically, at the White House dinner, the Prime Minister of Israel presented, who, again, according to the ICC, there is a warrant out for his arrest as a war criminal because of the genocide in Gaza. He presented President Trump with a letter of nomination, nominating President Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize for 2025. The president's response was as follows: coming from you in particular, this is very meaningful. Let's remember, coming from you, the you meaning Bibi Netanyahu, Benjamin Netanyahu, let's remember what the international law has deemed for this individual. And let's also remember that at that same dinner table, President Trump, that the Prime Minister of Israel nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for this year, announced more U.S. weapons instead of announcing a diplomatic solution, talks for at least a procedure for more diplomatic talks with Moscow and Kyiv, with Ukraine and Russia. He announced more weapons for Ukraine, arguing that Ukraine needs them to continue the war with Russia. Although this is the same president who had argued, while a nominee for the Republican Party, that he would end the war in Ukraine in a day. This is July. He was nominated of 2025. He was nominated on January 20th, 2025. And the war between Russia and Ukraine is continuing. Now, no one is that unrealistic to have assumed that this war would end in a day. However, what we have here very clearly is the forever war doctrine that the neoconservatives in both the United States and in Northwest European NATO member countries have been advocating is ongoing, regardless of whether it was the Biden administration or the Trump administration. Of course, this individual, now Trump, has been nominated by Netanyahu, of all people, for the Nobel Peace Prize, while the forever war doctrine is continuing. The other issue here, just as tragic, all wars are tragic, as Howard Zinn, the late professor of history in the United States, pointed out, all wars have civilians as victims. In the other war, which of course is a major tragedy since October 2023, is the genocide in Gaza. The genocide in Gaza, where the population is civilian and the victims are primarily children and women. The scholars and journalists have drawn comparisons between Srebrenica and the war in the genocide in Gaza, not just because the population is Muslim, although, as I said, when we look at the genocide of tragedies of post-World War II, what we see is they're largely concentrated in the global South, and really a great deal of them, whether in the Palestinians, Muslim, the Bosnia-Herzegovina Muslims, the Bosniaks, as they're called locally, by the way, also Muslim, the Rohingya in Myanmar, Muslim, the Uyghurs in Xinjiang province of the north west in China, Muslim. So when we look at the broader picture, there is a Muslim target for genocide, although the question of Xinjiang province is debatable, and of course there are those who argue that there has been genocide, those who argue no, it's not that as bad, and but there is an issue here of a globalized Islamophobia, as some scholars call it, especially since the Iranian Revolution of 1979, and especially since the War on Terror that unfolded gradually from the George Herbert Walker Bush administration, and who succeeded Ronald Reagan in 1989, and then it continued under Clinton and intensified after 9/11 with George W. Bush, and of course that followed with war of the United States in an occupation of Afghanistan for 20 years, by the way, and of course Iraq, as well as during the Obama period, a number of wars for regime change operations targeting Muslim countries across North Africa and the Middle East. All of this is important because this instability and the targeting by Western countries, global South, predominantly Muslim countries, is something that we have to be concerned about because it has become a pattern. Srebrenica, there are comparisons in the longer video. I point out a number of them, and I will go into detail, and I ask you to take a look at that video. But let me just point this out. Just as in Gaza, in Srebrenica, the Western countries, Northwest Europe, the United States, Canada, knew in advance of what was going to take place because the Serbian nationalists were making no secret of what they wanted. They were very public about it. from Slobodan Milosevic, the president of Serbia, and on down to the commanders in and the militias, the Serbian militias and the military that carried out the operation in Srebrenica, killing adult males, over 8,000 of them, close to 8,500 of them, adult males and boys up to a certain age, and relocating more than 2 million people, by the way. They made no secret of ethnic cleansing operation, of wanting to eliminate Muslims, just as Israel has made no secret. Just recently, I was reading about some of the very open, very public debates. And of course, this has been ongoing. It's not just recently. In the last 3 years, this has been ongoing in the last 2 years, 2.5 years. This has been ongoing about the ethnic cleansing issue, about freeing Gaza of Palestinians. Even President Trump wanted to make, at one point, he suggested making Gaza the French Riviera of the Eastern Mediterranean for wealthy people, and what to do with the Palestinians who live there, of course, more than 2 million. Well, so ethnic cleansing, as in Srebrenica, as in Gaza, public policy for those carrying out. The other issue that's of interest here, in both cases, in Gaza, in both the Gaza genocide and the Bosnian genocide, the people carrying out the genocide vilified the victims, demonized, dehumanized, and called them terrorists, by the way. People may be surprised to hear this. This was a long time ago, 30 years ago. But back in the mid-1990s, to the Serbian nationalist Orthodox Christians, the Bosniaks, meaning the Muslims, Bosnians, were terrorists, although they were the victims of genocide. Same thing in Gaza. So there are parallels here. I also think that there is something to be said about international law here, which is very important, and observance of human rights. At least in the Gaza, as we'll see, in the Srebrenica situation, the International Court did bring people, in fact, 8 people, to justice. In the case of Israel, there has been the complete shielding of the leadership of Israel by the United States primarily, but also Northwest Europe. So there is that difference. There is also the difference that in the case of Gaza, the victims are now approaching close to 60,000, mostly women and children. In the case of Srebrenica, it was males, adult males, and boys up to a certain age. Women and children under a certain age were excluded from the genocide, and the numbers are much lower in the case of Srebrenica. The larger question is, in the 21st century, we have this late 20th century and 21st century, we have genocide taking place, mainly, as I said, in the global south, and unfortunately taking place under the watchful eye of Western countries, supposedly proclaiming that they are interested in upholding international law and justice, when in fact are not doing, the record shows they have not done this. The record is very clear. Srebrenica did take place. It did take place under the watchful eye of the West. Okay, there's no doubt about that. The history is very clear. It's the same thing in Gaza. In Gaza, it's even clearer because it's televised. People take pictures. There's cell phones now that record everything. So we have there is no way to hide. Not to mention, of course, the very public pronouncement of ethnic cleansing as a goal. Okay, Now, I ask that you look at the analytical video of the 30th anniversary of Srebrenica, where I try to do some comparisons with what is taking place in Gaza. This is a tragedy that in both cases that has left the stigma on Western civilization claiming to be supportive of human rights and supportive of democracy, when in fact the record shows that genocide is hardly associated with human rights and democracy. Having any kind of complicity in the perpetrators of genocide and massacres of civilians is not consistent with democratic values and human rights values. Thank you for watching. I look forward to hearing your comments, and I ask you to subscribe to this channel. Thank you very much.